Democracy is one of those words we hear all the time, right? We kind of feel like we know exactly what it means. But here's the thing. It's way more complicated than you might think. So what actually makes a country a democracy? Let's dig in.
All right, so let's get right to the heart of it. The first thing that probably pops into your head is elections, right? But is that all there is to it? Is democracy just about holding a vote? Well, we're going to see that there's a whole lot more going on.
I mean, this is the simple definition we all got in school, right? Democracy is a government where the people elect their leaders. Seems straightforward enough. But, and this is a big but, that simple definition just doesn't cut it when you look at the real world. And this is exactly where that simple idea just completely breaks down. Let's look at two totally different places, China and Mexico, specifically before the year 2000. Now, on paper, both held regular elections, but look closer. In China, you can vote, sure, but only for candidates the Communist Party has already approved. And in Mexico, for 70 years, one party, the PRI, used all sorts of dirty tricks to make sure they won every single time. So you see, just having an election doesn't mean you have a democracy. Not even close. Okay, so that brings us to the real meat of this. If just having elections isn't the whole story, then what is? What are the key ingredients you need to cook up a real democracy? It turns out there are 4 features that are absolutely essential. All right, feature number 1. This one sounds super obvious, but stick with me. The leaders who get elected by the people, they have to be the ones actually in charge, making the major decisions. You'd be surprised how often that's not the case, because power can be a tricky thing hiding in the shadows. Let's take a look at Pakistan under General Musharraf. It's a perfect case study. If you just glanced at it, you'd think, yep, looks democratic. They had elected assemblies, a civilian cabinet, all the right stuff. But peel back that layer, and who was really calling the shots? It was the military officers and the general himself. They had the final say. So the people who were elected didn't actually have the ultimate power. And right there, it fails that first crucial test. Okay, moving on to feature number 2. This is so important. An election can't just be for show, It can't just be a meaningless ritual. For it to be truly democratic, it has to offer a real, genuine choice. And the whole process has to be free and fair. And we can actually go back to our earlier examples to see how this plays out. In China, you have the no real choice problem. The menu of candidates is already decided for you by the ruling party. In Mexico back in the day, you had the not fair problem. Sure, there were other parties on the ballot, but the system was so rigged with dirty tricks, they had zero chance of ever winning. Either way you slice it, the outcome is the same. It's not a real democracy. Now for feature number 3. And this one really gets to the core of what we think of as fairness. It's all about political equality. In a true democracy, every single adult citizen gets a vote, and every single one of those votes has to count equally. It's that classic principle, one person, one vote, one value. But history and even the present day are filled with examples where this just isn't true. For a long, long time in Saudi Arabia, women couldn't vote at all. In Estonia, citizenship rules were set up in a way that made it really tough for the Russian minority to get their vote. And check this out. In Fiji, the system was literally designed so that the vote of an indigenous Fijian was worth more than the vote of an Indian Fijian. I mean, come on. Each of these is a direct attack on the idea of democracy. And that brings us to our 4th and final feature. This one is so important. Think of it this way. Even if a government wins an election by a landslide, they don't get a blank check to do whatever they want. There have to be rules of the game, limits on their power that protect the basic rights of all citizens, even the ones who didn't vote for them. Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe is a really stark example of this. On the surface, they had the trappings of democracy. They held elections, they had a constitution, but what was happening in reality? The ruling party used unfair tactics to win. The president kept changing the constitution to grab more power. He ignored what the court said. He went after journalists. You see, being popular doesn't give you a free pass to ignore the rules and become an autocrat. Okay, so let's recap. We've got our 4 features for a real democracy. But this leads to a massive question, doesn't it? It's one thing to have a set of rules. It's another thing entirely to make them stick. How do you stop someone in power from just ignoring the rules, or even worse, changing them to suit themselves? Well, that's where the Constitution comes in. A constitution is the answer to that puzzle. It's the supreme rulebook. It's the law that stands above everyone, including the government itself. It's designed to lock in those democratic principles and make sure they can't just be tossed aside. And there is no better story to show why this is so critical than South Africa. I mean, just picture this. After decades of the brutal apartheid system, you have these two groups who were literally at war with each other. The white minority that held all the power and the black minority that was so horribly oppressed. Suddenly, they have to build a new country together. How do you even begin to do that? The biggest hurdle was trust. How could the black minority trust that the white minority wouldn't try to cling to power? And how could the white minority trust that they wouldn't face revenge? It seemed impossible. The solution? A new constitution. That was the only way forward. Think about what that document did. First, it created a foundation of trust so that these different groups could actually agree to live together. Second, it laid out the exact blueprint for how the government would be chosen. Third, and this is so important, it put hard limits on what that government could do, protecting everyone's rights. And finally, it wasn't just about rules, it was about hope. It laid out a vision for the kind of good society they all wanted to create. It was literally the foundation for a whole new nation. Nelson Mandela just put it so perfectly. A constitution isn't just a dry legal document. He called it a solemn pact. It's a promise that a nation makes to itself, saying, we will never, ever let that dark past happen again. Okay, from South Africa, let's travel to another huge, incredibly diverse nation that had its own massive challenges to overcome, India. Their constitution is another amazing story of a country trying to codify its very soul. Right at the very top of the Indian Constitution, before you get to any of the articles, there's something called the Preamble. And it's beautiful, it's short, it reads almost like poetry. And it's often called the soul of the Constitution. It's basically the entire mission statement for India, all in one paragraph. And just look at the powerful words in there. It calls India sovereign. What does that mean? It means the people of India, and only the people of India, get to make the decisions. No outside power gets to dictate to them. Then it says secular. In a country with so many different religions, this was huge. It means there's no official state religion. The government has to treat every faith equally. And of course, it establishes India as democratic, which we've been talking about. A government elected by and accountable to the people. And then there's republic. This was a really big deal because it meant breaking with the old systems of kings and queens. The head of the country would be an elected official, not someone who inherited the job. You see, these aren't just words on a page. They are fundamental choices about how an entire nation is going to be run. So, there you have it. The Constitution is the rulebook for rulers. But, and you knew there was about coming, writing the rules down is the easy part. Actually living up to them day in and day out, that's a whole different story. And that really brings us to the central challenge, the constant struggle at the heart of every single democracy. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who's one of the main architects of India's constitution, said something so profound right as it was being adopted. He said, look, we're about to enter a life of contradictions. In politics, we'll have equality, one person, one vote. Amazing. But in our social and economic life, we still have massive inequality. He asked, how long can we live this contradiction? It's such a powerful point. The Constitution can promise equality on paper, but it's up to the people, up to society to make it real. And that really is the perfect place to end, because what it all comes down to is this. A constitution gives you the blueprint. The rulers are supposed to follow the rules. But the fate of a democracy, whether it thrives or fails, doesn't just depend on them. It depends on its citizens. It depends on us. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what's our part to play in all this? How do we help close that gap between the promise of democracy and its reality?